This conference will now be recorded.
So last week we covered the topic of instilling values, and we looked at um, the uh, the family mission statement as being one of the key ways of doing that. Um, if possible, it'd be good to hear either in the chat or you can turn your mic. Did any of the brothers and sisters attempt this? Inshallah, the family mission statement. Have you managed to make any progress from last week? It would be good to hear if there are any, inshallah, and then we can proceed on to today's topic. So feel free to jump in, inshallah. Sister Nadia saying not yet, but planning to, inshallah. It'd be good to hear. Did anybody start any discussions with with your children, with your family? Okay. Somebody in ZK saying I've seen a brother do one specifically for Ramadan, which is good. Ramadan, alhamdulillah, is good, but we're looking at something that you can do as a longer lasting thing for the family that includes the family in order to kind of get their buy-in and have clear outline what are the values that you do have as a family. Inshallah, next week or so. So, inshallah, if you haven't, it's not a problem. It's good that while we are in this situation where we are currently at home more than anything, and more than any time before, is a good opportunity to be able to try and now get that up and running to get this process started. And like I said, it's not a process you rush. It takes time. So by all means, take your time, but try and start this process because you'll be very, very beneficial for your children. And like I said, you'll be very surprised with what your children actually come up with. And this is a process for them to be able to get involved with the family and feel part of the family, inshallah. So today's topic of discussion was in regards to sibling rivalry. So again, each week I'm trying to address different topics that have come up as kind of hot topics, you could say, that parents have requested for me to cover and discuss. So I think one of the key ones was in regards to sibling rivalry. And we know that a lot of children, if you ask them who are your best friends, some of them may say they may make reference to their siblings being their best friends. But then at the same time, you'll find siblings that they fight, they argue, they dislike each other from time to time, and that in itself is very normal. That rivalry that happens is very normal. And even if we look back into our own childhood, well, I'm sure we can recount numerous times where we had fights and disagreements and arguments with our siblings, those of us who have siblings. And similarly, our children will go through the same process. More so, maybe you'll find older siblings as older children struggling, especially with any new arrivals that come into the family. For them, it's the upheaval of their world, and it takes time to adjust, for the children to adjust. Just get the slides up, inshallah. So we can, as I said, it takes children time to adjust. And a lot of children, sometimes the rivalry happens because, again, there's different needs. Children have different needs. And sometimes there could be competition for similar things, so a same toy. It could be for a kind of competition for attention and validation from parents. These are also processes that take place. And that if there is a long-term negative relationship that happens between siblings, it can be detrimental to the family and to the children on the long run. And I think as parents, we all want our children to get along. It makes our life easier, but also it's a sense of family, a sense of community that comes together, that you know that they're there to support one another. Parents won't be there forever. We know that. And that the hope sometimes we have is our children are there to support each other and to continue into adulthood. And so that's why it becomes really important. We want to have strong sibling relationship as it sets them up for the older life. And so therefore, if we want that as a future goal, it's important that the footing from the beginning is correct. and we try our best to try and make it as best as possible. And there's a lot of studies that have shown actually that sibling relationship provides children and adults with help, care, compassion, companionship, and support through their life. That's the key part that we would like to have, that they can, as going to adult life, while there are many difficulties and many struggles that adults do face, it's important that the wider network, they do have that support network around them that is very much helpful for them. And so we want that to happen. So as we move on into the topic, first and foremost, the discussion would be like kind of understanding why our children fight. So again, a question to those who are present now. Why do children fight? Why do you think children fight? You can comment in the chat or you can unmute yourself and contribute. Abu Adam said jealousy. Yep. Brother Abdul Ali said want attention. Sister Madiha, maybe they feel threatened by an older child. AA said they may find it difficult to express their emotions. Sister Rabia said don't want to share, but rather than pride. So we know there can be a million different reasons, literally a million different reasons why children would fight. And just a jealousy, competition, frustration, we've named a lot of them. And what we have to understand is that this fighting that children that they have amongst each other, siblings have amongst each other, is a normal part of life. So we accept that it's normal. There's nothing wrong with it. But the key part for a parent that we need to know is within this fighting and bickering that might take place, it's important for parents that they're able to distinguish between what was normal fighting, this day-to-day normal life fighting, or any emerging relationship issues. Because obviously, if there's any emerging relationship issues, then that's sort of stuff that we need to be concerned about. And that's the thing that we need to look at how we can intervene in that and prevent that from happening. So the more we can try to understand our children, yeah, the more it will help us to make this distinction between something that is a emerging relational issue and something to do with just normal daily life fighting. Now, there's two kind of key parts that we can look at understanding why children fight. The first one is actually around differing needs. So sometimes children have differing needs, and they fight because their needs aren't being met. And the key part of this is because children have different needs, you know, and it's depending on their age and depending on their personality. So it's clear that they have different needs. So example by that, so a toddler is growing and it's learning about the concept or learning about ownership. And so naturally, a toddler will become frustrated if about sharing, and they don't want to share. Whereas a school-age child, they will start to begin to learn about the concept of fairness. And we'll actually tackle a bit about fairness towards the end of today's session, inshallah. So about fairness, and they might start to feel angry towards a younger child who receives more or preferential or different levels of attention than they do. So then they look at it as being unfair. And another example is that teenagers, they started to come into adulthood, and they're understanding more and learning more about independence. And naturally, part of that is they then start to sometimes rebel against boundaries and the ground rules as they try to get that level of independence. So differing needs, that can be obviously understanding, okay, what are their needs of the child. The other one a key part of it is actually around temperament. That we have to understand that all of our children, they are individuals with different personalities and characteristics. And examples again of that, the individual different personalities. So you might have a child who's very much an independent child, and they like their own company. And so they will get annoyed and frustrated with a younger sibling that keeps following them around. So they want to be basically on their own, independent, doing their thing, and they don't like this tag along that's with them. Another one of your children, for example, they may take pride in their work and arts and crafts and all of those things, and they really get frustrated with the interruptions, the interference of their siblings. And also we can look at it that some children, just like adults as well, same thing, there are some who are introverts and some who are extroverts. And so that has an impact on how they relate to each other. There could be complete opposites to children. And so there can be naturally sometimes clashes because of their temperament. Now, To decipher the children's temperament will then allow us to facilitate boundaries and then in the long run get along with each other. Because we know we put adults into the same room, not everyone's going to get along. Everyone's personality is different. Some are quiet, some are louder, some are more sociable, some are, like I said, introvert, extrovert. Some maybe are better with taking jokes, some may not. And you have those frictions anyway within adults. So naturally, it will happen within children. So an example would be, how do we understand the child's temperament and facilitate boundaries? It could be that a child maybe likes a lot of alone time. They're a bit more of a child that likes that. So at times, facilitate that for them. So it might be that you give them a private space, a place where they can be on their own, and they can basically have space for example, reading by themselves and being away from this other children. But at the same time, you have another child who likes a lot of noise or likes a lot of company. So in that case, what you should do is encourage them to play with the rest of the family, where family are around, where there might be noise. So in the central family area, maybe the living room, and you encourage that kind of thing. So understand them with the temperaments, provide the right boundaries, and then that will help facilitate and get them along better. So that's an important point of understanding why is it that our children fight. Now, there's a key part that that's kind of important. Obviously, as was discussed before, children a lot of the time they are fighting because they are getting, or sometimes they fight with one another in order to get the parental attention. And they sometimes are fighting because you're not giving enough time, enough attention to them. And sometimes in that relationship, like we discussed before, an older child might start feel that, oh, a new arrival has come to the family, they're getting more attention, or the younger child is getting more attention, and the concept of fairness we discussed about before. And so those things could be happening. So with that, what is important that we can try and do as parents is provide a one-to-one time with each of our children. And that's an important part of the development, because while we're in the family, we're cutting ourselves in many pieces. So as I mentioned before, I've got 6 children. I have to cut myself in 6 pieces in order for them to all get a piece of me in one sitting, and that's not enough for them. And they require more and more of that parental engagement on a one-to-one basis. So you need to look at facilitating that one-to-one time with your child. Now, this is something that I've talked about before in other places, in my courses as well, and and obviously this was more discussed around before the lockdown, before the pandemic. But even in a pandemic, you can amend it and make it still work, which is this quality alone time you have with each of your children. And there are some things that even before the pandemic that I had been doing with my family is on a rotational basis. Every week, I would set aside a time, usually it should be Saturday evenings, and I would have one-to-one time with each of my children. So that means Saturday evening, the first Saturday of the month, I would have in the evening set aside 3 hours, and those 3 hours are alone time with just one of my children, me and one. The following week, so first week might be my eldest, the following week will be my second child, the third week, third child, fourth week, and then we rotate back again. So it was kind of every kind of 4 or 5 weeks, it was kind of taking place. Then you have that process returning. So every month or so, just over a month, they were getting that one-to-one time with me. And in those 3 hours they were spending, the child was able to do whatever they liked. They were the one who were able to choose what is it that they wanted to do. And in that setting, we were able to have some bonding and some listening. And I'll go through some steps. Now we can still do this now, that kind of concept, even now at home. So you're seeing your children all the time together, but you might not be giving them one-to-one time. So if you're not giving them one-to-one time, then you can still facilitate that. Set aside an evening maybe. So when all the other children go to sleep, that one child can stay up. And there are many activities you can still do within the home with the child, whether it's even bringing food in, if it's playing games, if it's to watch something. You can do different activities, cook, bake. There's things that you can be creative within the home. The key part of it is spending that one-to-one time with your child. And with the one-to-one, there's actually certain steps that are required that you need to facilitate, that you have to do. So the first one is the one-to-one time. Apologies. The one-to-one time is, first and foremost, is designed for you to listen with your child. So here is a time for you to listen to your child, to hear them. And we talked about, was it last week? We talked about to listen to understand, um, and not necessarily for us to listen in order to respond. A lot of the time when we speak to our children, we relay our life story, our learning, our experience, all of those things onto our children, but we don't listen to understand them. So this is the important time, that while you have a one-to-one time with your child, you listen to understand them. You're there to listen. You're not there to dictate to them, to push on your own life experiences and your life stories onto them. And this is an important thing, because sometimes we don't listen to our children enough. The second thing is it becomes a platform of not to judge, because we talked about, children, they keep secrets. As they grow older, they'll keep secrets. Um, Sometimes they will do things that are wrong and they feel maybe scared to tell you. And we know when it comes to teenage years, it becomes harder and harder. So when you facilitate a space, so what I've always done with my children is, by allowing this one-to-one time with them on a weekly basis, that it's a time where it's not to judge. It's almost like you look at it as a confession. The Christians have it, they may confess. But similarly, it becomes a space for not to judge the child. They can come and effectively they can say anything, and it's not a judgment space. Rather, we're going to try and understand what happened, why it happened, and try and come to an understanding. So it enables your child to feel free to say something without the fear of some hard repercussion or punishment and so on. And it creates an element of trust. Yeah? So, could I just ask you to mute, inshallah? So, so it's that element of judging, and it increases that trust and that truth telling between your child. The next one is enjoying your company. So when you are in that one-to-one time with your child, is to enjoy it, it's to create memories. Allow your children to create memories with you. Sometimes when you look back at life, as adults, we look back into our childhood, we remember moments, we remember engagements. We don't necessarily remember the materialistic things. Rather, we remember the company we had, the good company we enjoyed. And so similarly, that's what you want to create. Now, it's an important thing to create those good memories, because by creating those good memories, we know that as we get older and when we do pass away, that child, when they have fond memories and good memories, they'll be more inclined to remember you frequently, of making dua for you. And we know that when a person dies, all of the deeds end, except for that righteous. One of them is that except for that righteous child who continues to make dua. And so that's what we really want to have from our children, for them to basically be continue to have that and to create those good memories. Now you can do different things and you experience different things. And I always give this one example. Um, so and my daughter, she wanted to go to ice skating. So I went to ice skating. One of the evenings, me and her went. I've never ice skated in my life. It was a horrid and terrible time for me, but she loved and enjoyed the experience. And I also enjoyed it because I spent time with her. She's able to ice skate. So she was going around while I was holding the sides and going past and slipping and falling. But at the end of the day, it's a good and a great memory that I enjoyed. So again, there are things that you can do. Obviously, this is outside of the pandemic time, but we're at home. You can do, obviously, like I said, be creative in what we can do. But create those memories and create those times, that one-to-one time with the parent. And um, and as I said, you enjoy the company and you create memories. And so they're the four key things that you want to do in this one-to-one time that we can have with our child. And remember, in this one-to-one time, that also means put your phone away. Don't be distracted. You should give yourself entirely to your child. Give the time and allow them, as I said, to hear them, to listen to them, and to engage with them. And if we can do this, this can be a step of building really good and strong relationships, foundational relationship with your children, and it can have a knock-on effect in that, what do you call it, in dealing with some of this sibling rivalry that might take place over one over the other, inshallah. But even after doing this, inshallah, naturally kids will still be fighting. I'm not saying by doing this activity or doing this one-to-one time going to take away the fighting. It isn't, but it is a step that will help mediate some things. But children will still fight. So then naturally the question arises, what do you do when they do fight? When they start fighting, what is it that you're going to do? So naturally, when we see our children fighting, it's a parental nature that they basically, that you don't want to see your children in conflict. You don't want to see them fighting. We want that. We know that we want them to all get along. And when they do start fighting, it is very much natural for us to basically want to jump in and resolve and fix the issue. But unless somebody is actually getting hurt or there's something serious happening, that something very dangerous, you should, as much as possible, try and stay out of it. And just try and stay out of getting in with the conflict. And the reason why is because children they do have the ability, and they should learn the ability as well, of resolving conflict themselves. And this is a massive life lesson that they require in life. That they will, throughout life, will go through conflict. In adult life, many times we know we go through conflict, whether it be at work, whether it be family, whether it be friends. They have to know how to be able to resolve it. But parents continually going in and continually intervening within the children's fighting, it starts to create a dependency, a parental dependency. So sometimes even for your own sake, you don't want your child coming every 2 minutes saying, mom, dad, he did this and she did that. And it gets more and more. So what it can be, it also helps you by actually allowing them to resolve some of it, but also it prevents them from being dependent, because we try to create self-regulating, autonomous children. And we're building this block by block in their life. Another issue we have is that if you do always intervene, then you might get accused of favoritism. As a child, they'll be saying, "Oh, that's not fair. You basically you favor him because he's younger, or he's the," and then you start getting basically labeled that, "Oh, this is your favorite child." And so again, it allows us to prevent that from happening. And as I mentioned, that children need to learn how to cope with conflict, because the conflict with the relationship with the siblings will be a lifelong relationship. As they get into adulthood, they will also have conflicts, so they have to learn how to also deal with those conflicts. If they can't start from an early on age, it can become a deep rooted issue into adulthood as well. And so for them to be able to maintain that successful and that meaningful relationship as they grow up into older ages, to allow that for that to happen. So, and also there's been some key studies in this matter that show that through conflict, children actually learn important skills such as how to negotiate, how to take on the perspective of others, and how to argue their own position. And these are key skills they actually learn. So let's look at the opportunities of this fighting and the bickering, of how we can then basically allow them to develop and grow these skills. And like I said, we have to give them that space to grow. If we're always there and smothering them, they won't grow and they won't be able to learn these skills. So this also naturally brings us on to the next question, which is they're fighting. So how can I support them? How can I basically, what can I do without physically intervening and jumping in within the children? How can I allow that growth for them to happen? So the first thing is we try to educate and teach them how to disagree respectfully. So beforehand, these are some of the training you should do, is we upskill them with the tools required before that time arises. So how to disagree respectfully. So that includes teaching them how to disagree respectfully without name calling, because that's one of the things that happens very naturally, very easily. Kids straight away start calling names, calling each other names, winding each other up. So it's fine. We all disagree. Everybody disagrees in life, but we don't have to resort to that kind of tactic. So we teach them a respectful way of disagreeing. The next thing is about trying to contain the disagreements within boundaries. And so you should ensuring that things don't get out of hand. So telling them that, look, if this does happen, if that happens, what are the next steps you can take? So preventing things from going out of hand, becoming physical, becoming threatening or dangerous. And sometimes when the kids are feeling, you might feel like you have to intervene, but when you do then have to intervene, try and not resolve everything for them. Don't solve everything for them. So while you're having to intervene because there's no choice, because you have to now, because you've been dragged into it, then how is it that you can do it? And a technique you can try and do, an example of trying not to solve everything, is put them all in the same boat. So two children are bickering, just say my two boys are fighting over the PlayStation, and whose turn it is. And they're all fighting, they can't resolve the issue, they get scared, and they say, okay, fine, you've got an option. You either find a way to basically resolve the issue, or I'm gonna basically ban the PlayStation for the rest of the day. So by putting the onus back on them, they have to understand that, okay, it's in their best interest that they find a solution together. And so you're putting them in the same boat, knowing that if they both fail to do something, they're both going to lose something. So allowing them to basically come together in order to find the best solution together, and it's in their best interest. So trying that kind of approach and that kind of tactic. And another key thing that will help us in the long run, without having to physically intervene and our children knowing it, and we've discussed it many times, that just again is about modeling. We have to look at how we disagree and how we maybe argue with our spouse. How is it? Do you resort to, again, name calling? Do you resort to raising our voices and shouting? Do you resort to other things? And our children see this. Remember, our children follow our actions, not necessarily our words. They hear our actions. As the age-old saying goes, action speaks louder than words. And so they do follow that more. Also, they also look at how you as an adult also interact with your siblings. Are you respectful now, even as an adult, with your siblings, in your relationship with them? Or do you again become loud, abusive, aggressive, and so on? But if they see that, then that's when they again model that kind of behavior on themselves. So it's important that, if we have the best of character, if we uphold ourselves to a higher standard, then our children will see that and they'll be able to follow through on that, inshallah. Now, if we look at after kind of discussing about how, without physically intervening, how can we now actually start creating those positive memories? And this point of creating positive memories is quite an important thing, because if children don't have positive memories in childhood, and as they grow up, they can start to hate each other and resent one another, because they'll look back in childhood and they'll remember all these negative experiences, all these negative memories with their siblings. And so it's important that you try to overcome that. And because all they will remember is that fight, that conflict. A lot of the times, the way our memories are, that they can become scarred almost. We look, especially in the younger ages, that sometimes we look back at our memories and we think of a certain experience, and we only remember the negative elements of it, because they're the most overarching thing that kind of stuck into our mind, and there weren't enough good memories that allowed that to overcome the negative ones. And so, with memories, creating positive memories is done via a very simple solution. It's basically maths. Yeah, it's simple. It's very much maths. And the way it is in example is in a day, which our aim should be that in a day, if your child or your children, the siblings amongst them, are having 10 negative experiences in a day or 10 negative interactions, we have to counter that by providing 11, 12, 13 positive interactions. So then when you look back at the day, the positive interactions outweigh the negative interactions. So then that day will go down as a good day. But the moment you have more negative interactions than positive interactions, then what ends up happening is they remember that as a negative experience. And so it becomes so much more important that as parents, that we need to invest more in joint experiences as a family for our children than over material gifts. Because it's easy for us as a parent to give material gifts, give items, give these things, make our children happy, and they go on. But what is harder is that to give that time. But that then becomes more important. We invest that time in a collective, in a family experience, and where we're together and we're able to facilitate that. So that could be so many things. It can be going to, it could be lots of things to do with positive outings. So we can be, going out, going to the park, doing things together as a family, try and do different experiences. Maybe do some fundraising activity together, do some cooking together, visit some relatives, do some social community work as well. Doing those positive experiences together, playing games, more and more of that we have, it'll become basically more valuable for us later on in adulthood. And the key thing is that later on in life, in our relationships with our siblings, if cracks start to emerge in our relationships with our siblings, then if we have lots of positive memories, we have a spillover of memories, then they're the ones that are able to help cover over those cracks and smooth over those cracks in those relationships. Because people look back at our younger years and you remember all of those good experiences, and they're the ones that help you see you through troubled times and difficult times in those relationships. So it's very simple, a simple application of maths. Ensure that positive memories always outweigh the negative, and as a parent, invest in facilitating more positive experiences for your children as opposed to the negative experiences. So I'll quickly look at some of the questions that's come through uh, and address them. Okay, somebody just said that if on the one-to-one time we talked about with the children, that if they choose to play on the PlayStation, the whole one-to-one time, is that okay? Because it doesn't feel like time valuably spent. That isn't negative or bad in itself because it's this experience that's there. But what you want to try and do is whatever engagement you're having on a one-to-one level, try to ensure that you're able to talk, because the important part is actually the talk, the interaction that takes place, and that's what helps build on that. So try and look at those kind of things, but you don't have to spend the whole time. You can spend a portion of the time maybe playing, a portion of the time doing something else, but trying to make it something that's friendly and enjoyable for the child. So Yusuf said, does it matter which parent the one-to-one's done with? The best case scenario is the mother should have a one-to-one time with the child, and so should the father separately. You shouldn't have two parents, mother and a father, with the one child, because now the relationships become overbearing. Two adults, one child. It needs to be on a level footing, mum with child, dad with child, and try to facilitate that. If your time doesn't permit, then at least have a parent that's doing that, and that would help on that meaningful relationship that takes over. Sister Khadija said, when I leave my children to come to a solution or lose something collectively, my eldest seems to get his way most of the time. This is a very strong character. How can I work on that, please, where he listens to his sisters too? So in those situations, before these incidents occur, like I said, we talked about setting the clear boundaries. We talked about it in a previous slide about setting clear boundaries. 1 second. Yeah, so setting clear boundaries with your children becomes an important part of knowing that how it is, what is acceptable behavior for your child, and that becomes a clear part. So before anything, we should always ensure that we have that knowing. Okay, this is what is acceptable behavior. This is how we disagree respectfully. And again, if this is an issue, then you raise the point that that as an older child, that you also have to be able to negotiate and take into consideration the facts about your other child as well. How do we deal with the long-term negative relationship between siblings who seem to dislike each other strongly and are constantly putting each other down? Children, like I said, they will do that. It's natural. They're gonna always continue. Like I said, I've got 6 children, and it feels like every day they're always bickering, they're always fighting. There's always something that they're continually having to go at each other about, putting each other down. It almost seems like they hate each other. But I'm sure when you look at it in other occasions and situations, sometimes they can gel and play well together. It's just a natural process that they have. So the key part, as I mentioned before, was work on investing a lot of time in doing collective things together where possible. So like I said, it's not always the case. At home, it's going to be difficult now, but it can be a lot of games, a lot of, think of other ways you can be creative in terms of spending time together at home and in a collective way and doing positive engagement and work. Naturally, when kids are left to each other, they're going to eventually get bored and they're going to the bickering and then into the fighting. But if we can create more of those, then inshallah that would help. Are there certain body languages that would be effective for one-to-one time, eye to eye, level nodding head, restating opinions, validation? Yes, but Abdul Ali said there are many things when you are having one-to-one time with your child that you can try and ensure that you have lots of good body language, positive. You have to show you're attentive, that you're listening. A lot of the time they're saying something, yes, sometimes restating. If they're expressing emotions and feelings, try and again give names and words to those emotions and those feelings that they're feeling in order for them to feel that you've understood them. These are some of the stuff that you can do. And inshallah, there is some stuff that I will hopefully be out on my website that will talk a bit more about things you can do in the one-to-one time with the children. And then tips for sibling rivalry at older age. Each person's personality is different, and some are intolerant than others. Older age, if you're talking about adulthood, obviously this becomes a lot difficult, a lot of different things, because some of those things have been deep rooted from childhood, and that's a different area to kind of discuss. If it's older age, as in like we're talking about teenagers, again, similar kind of approaches. If you continually apply and you work on it, this will help in one way of kind of mending that bridge between each of your children and in the relationship with each other. One of the other things I want to quickly move on to, and we'll take some questions again before the end, is we talked about fairness, and children, I think one of the most common things that they say is, it's not fair. We hear it all the time. They cry out, it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair. And actually, some of the points that I'm going to be mentioning now is actually from an assembly that I designed and I delivered at our local school, several series of assemblies that I delivered to the children there. And in those assemblies, we discussed a lot about this. And I also discussed this a lot with our children in trying to address and get them to understand more about the concept of what is fairness. And naturally, a child, when asked, okay, it's not fair, he got this or I didn't get that, and these are kind of the arguments they have, that they equate fairness, or they think fairness is equality, and equality is fairness, and so they think it's basically equality is a synonym for fairness. And so they say it's not fair because, and they use an analogy of, I got 10 sweets, he got one, it's not fair, so I should be an equal share of it. And we know as parents, a lot of the times, sometimes we have to make a judgment call. Sometimes we have to try and work within certain boundaries and certain, heat of the moment things. Sometimes we're working because we know there's a younger sibling, a very young child who wants something, or somebody who's older, who doesn't seem to understand that, sometimes you have to give the younger one a choice first before the older one. And it's those kind of things that end up happening. And so it's an important discussion that you can have with your children regarding, and I had this actually again the other day, because we're in lockdown. I'm hearing constantly, it's not fair, it's not fair. And we sat down, we spoke about it, and there were some good examples that my children gave in regards to what they understood as what was fairness. And most of the time it's equality. So the key point is, we want to unravel is there's a difference between what we understand as equality and fairness, or another word for fairness is equity. And it's about allowing everybody to have kind of a level playing field. And that's what we want to create, a level playing field, and trying to address that. Now, this is an image that I've used many times before. I actually use it in the assemblies as well, in order to discuss regarding what is equality and what is fairness. And in here, it shows an example of 3 children. Equal is that they all got the same thing, a box each. They all stand on the box, they're all equal. But because of that, the taller child has a better, maybe still can see, no difference. The middle child just got his head over the barrier and can see. And the little child is still unable to see. But when we talk about fairness, we're saying that we're trying to make sure that everybody has a level playing field. What that means is everybody's getting the same opportunity to see. So the tall child doesn't require now a box to stand on. The middle child still requires 1 box, and the younger child requires 2 boxes. Or shorter child requires 2 boxes. And now what's happened is an equal playing field. And we had to have that discussion to try and get them to understand. And we actually did a visual discussion. I actually got the kids to stand up on the row, put some pillows out, and the smaller ones couldn't see, the older ones couldn't see. And we discussed about it, and we got them to bring out, okay, what is fairness? What actually makes this now fair? And they themselves came up with it. And this is an important exercise, I think, that might be very useful for parents to do with their own children, is to discuss and get them to come up with the answers. Give them questions, probe, and let them come up with the answers so they can understand in their own minds, oh, this actually isn't fair. And so, and to try and decipher and unravel the difference between what is equality and what is fairness. And we had that discussion because sometimes, again, as I said, one of my sons is autistic, from a mild element of the spectrum. And sometimes, again, his behavior, his emotions is very difficult for him to control. And so sometimes some leniency is applied to him while he is having an outburst because he can't control it. And other times, things, there are rules that need to be abided by. And sometimes my older son, he's not unable to understand it's not fair. How come he's getting maybe some preferential treatment, it seems. So you have to understand everybody's abilities. And sometimes you can make references between equality and fairness in regards to a child maybe who is unable to walk or is in a wheelchair, and you make an analogy between that and a person to walk, and you say both of them have to climb the stairs. Is that then fair? Is that then equal? And on the back of that, you're able to really kind of have a good discussion. So while we're in this period, we're at home, try and have a lot of these discussions. They're conceptual things, but they help in the long term with us in our parenting and our ability to deal with some of these issues that we're facing day to day in regards to the bickering and the fighting, and the biggest thing about equality and fairness, inshallah. Um, and so, as a kind of general summary of the points that I went over today, inshallah, is that it should be very clear that siblings will undoubtedly, they will fall out, they will disagree, they will compete for parental attention, and they'll struggle over possessions. So this is a natural part of life. So we shouldn't feel overwhelmed, upset. Sometimes the thought can come in, oh no, they're going to fight forever, they're going to become older, and they're going to continue to fight forever, and this doesn't really help. This is a natural part of life. A job for us as parents is that it's to not our job is not to prevent them from bickering or fighting, or for this to ever to happen. That's not our role. It's going to happen. Rather, we should be looking at trying to foster positive relationships by facilitating um, um, happy memories for them, and then that will work. That's like a collection in the bank, and we have to look at it in that concept, that the more positive memories we can now build up in their memory bank, yeah, this is what's going to be able to tap into later on in life when things get tough, when they're feeling down and low, they can tap into those positive emotions. And so that's what we're looking at, building up the deposits in the positive memory bank. And that we know that one day we're going to leave behind our children. And so one of the things that we can do, one of the things that we can leave behind for them is strong ties between them is one of the greatest gifts that we can leave behind for them. And so that's one of the things that we need to do, try to encourage and foster and allow them to grow in those positive relationships amongst each other without having to interfere, and allow them to kind of grow on that, inshallah. With that, inshallah, I'll look at some now questions again. So feel free, if you've got any questions, you can turn your mic on and ask, or you can use the chat function, inshallah, to ask questions, inshallah. So we'll take some questions. Additionally, if there are any questions from the previous two sessions, by all means, you can also drop those questions in. You can try and have a bit of a session. Today, I've tried to facilitate a bit more time at the end of the session to allow for question and answers, as in the previous two sessions, to kind of finish more or less bang on time. So Sister Shabisa, assalamu alaikum. How to stop eldest child 14 from continuously and aggressively keep pointing out every little thing his siblings are doing wrong, and then becoming even aggressive when I say I will deal with it. He feels the younger siblings get away with a lot more than he does. I think, I've read this after the last point about fairness. Maybe that can be an exercise that you can try with your siblings, going through with your children, going through with the eldest child, talking about the concept of fairness and unraveling it. Because I guarantee you, when you ask a child what is fair, they're going to say everybody getting something equal, and that isn't the case. And we're trying to teach them that, there's equality and there's equity, and that was the difference between the two images I showed. Equality, everybody gets an equal share. Equity is based on its needs. Everybody's getting sometimes people are going to get more of a helping hand in order to get the same level playing field and the same ability to be able to access the same resources and the same kind of experiences together. So have that approach and try and have those kind of discussions, because I think that is a really important step of unlocking what's in their own mind about what they understand about what is fair. And then, like I said, in those discussions, in those boundaries, is you have to try and also set the boundaries for actually good or healthy disagreement. So as we said before in the earlier slide, in regards to creating safe boundaries, knowing that name calling isn't acceptable, knowing that if you disagree, these are the steps that you should go through. And we're teaching them and giving them the skills of conflict resolution. And that's some of the stuff that we're trying to look at, inshallah. Is there any other questions anybody has? Any other brothers and sisters have?
Alaikum.
Like salam.
I don't have any question, but I just wanted to say, from my experience, like for example, I have a teenage son. He's like 18 years old, and the other ones are much younger. And sometimes, as parents, what we do, we just assume things, like like we've got it in our head that teenagers are lazy, that kind of thing. So, like today, for example, like we've created this box because of the lockdown, where as family we all got together and we had to write a little note, like what we will do as a little activity every day, and we have to carry it out. And no one can see what you write, but you put it in the box. So each day we have a turn and we take the box out. So today was like, for example, hide and seek. So he wouldn't budge. Like he's in his room on his phone, he wouldn't budge. And the two little ones are like, oh, Baya won't do it. Like he's so lazy and all that. So I had to go in. At first I thought, oh, you know what? Forget it. Us three just play. And then I thought, no, I have to try something else. I went into his room and I'm like, come on, like, let's just play 5 minutes, like hide and seek. How long is it going to take? And at least it will shut them up. And he's like, all right, fine. He moaned, he got up, but he actually had a lot of fun. So, I mean, every day is kind of hard getting him to do activity, but once he's doing it, like the other day we had like a truth and dare thing as a family. He actually laughed so much. I haven't seen him laugh like that for a long time. So rather than assuming, if you just give them the choice and just say, look, it's 5 minutes, we'll make the little ones happy. And you'll see that they will, inshallah, join. Like even their dad, we had hide and seek like a couple of days ago. My husband didn't want to play, and my daughter's like, "Come on, Abu, you always do that." And then he was actually laughing, running around the house. So we could do those kind of stuff.
Yep. No.
It's a suggestion.
That's a good point, sister. So Jazakallah khair for that point, inshallah. Sister Madea said group activities seem to trigger more arguments, fighting, and sometimes keeping them apart seems to be the only way to stop it. It's something that should be done, avoided. Yeah, I've gone through the same experience. So many times we've done group activities, thinking, okay, let's do that, but then they end up fighting, bickering, crying, and you sometimes feel like it's better off not even playing any games and letting them be alone. But if we look at the steps right at the beginning, I said, try to understand each of your child. Each child you have, understand them. How are they? Are they introverts? Are they extroverts? Are they people who are more, are they independent, or do they like noise? And try to understand each of them, and that will help you in designing whatever group activities or games that you do play, and knowing the right times and what triggers them. A lot of it is hard work for the parent, but that will really help you in the long run, being able to understand, okay, how are each of your child, how is each of your child, how are each of your children, and how to deal with them accordingly. But one of the things is you shouldn't try and give up on those group activities. Maybe one group activity causes conflict, but there might be another group activity that won't necessarily cause conflict. A lot of the times in parenting, it's trial and error. It's what works for your family, what works, what doesn't work, what your children actually enjoy, what they don't enjoy. And so you have to go through that process. There isn't a one thing that fixes everything, but we try and we get to the bottom of it. Each child is different. Each activity is different. Okay.
Can I just say something, regarding group activity? Yes, sometimes there's conflict, but brother, how you were saying, as in creating memories, because I remember one of my clear memories as, during my teenage years, as siblings, we were playing Ludo with my dad. And while we were playing, my dad got frustrated over a certain rule. And then he actually, he moved his hand quite far, quickly, and he actually accidentally punched my nose. And it actually hurt, and I cried. And I'm like, you punched me over Ludo. But then, like, like even now we bring it up and I'll tell my dad, remember the time you hit me because of Ludo? He goes like, oh, no, I didn't. So it's a good memory because I remember having fun with my dad. So, even siblings, you see, like sit back after a few years and you talk about this thing, and that itself is like have a good laugh. You can have a good laugh over those things, even if it was hurtful at that time.
Yeah, no, that's true. There are good memories that can be created from that. One of the questions is, how do you get children to understand forgiving and forgetting instead of reminding each other what the other did for the rest of the day? We try to explain how to say sorry to someone and want them to forgive and move on, but it never happens. Yeah, it's a hard thing about getting them to say sorry, because a lot of the times the issue of saying sorry is they just say it's lip service and they don't actually mean it. And it's something that I discuss was it last week or the week before, managing behavior. Yeah, I think it overlapped over both weeks. We discussed in regards to, when emotions are high, that is never a good time for any learning or education to take place. So in the heat of that moment when something has happened, in order to force the child to then say sorry, they're not going to mean it, and it's not going to be good, and they're not going to move on from it. When that situation has passed and the emotions are now low, and they've kind of almost put that away from their mind, then you can go through the process of education and understanding that, look, this is what's happened. How do you think they felt? How do you think you felt? And get into the crux of it. And so there's some learning that then takes place going forward. At that moment, it's going to be very hard for them to say no. When children, again, about them forgetting, and they keep reminding each other days, because the emotions are still high. It hasn't actually calmed down. So you need to look at mechanisms and ways of calming the situation down and calming their emotions down. Because I tell you, children forget very quickly. They do. If you allow their mind to shift, and that's what you need to do, to look at shifting their mind, them to cool down and move on to another activity so they can forget about what happened before, and then afterwards you address it. So it's one of those things you do in later on when the mind is cool, not at the heat of the moment, because the heat of the moment they're never gonna really pay attention. They're not gonna listen or learn. One sister says, "Can you question?" Yeah, in regards to one of the sisters said about if you have a 15-year-old son with autism not being able to get along with a 6-year-old or being in the same room with a 6-year-old, it's a lot more difficult when you've got obviously autistic children. And with autism, it's on the spectrum, and so it really does depend on where they are on the spectrum, because then each child will have a certain technique that might help them and make them be more getting along. Sometimes they won't be able to get along, and you have to allow that space and that time to be separated until they can learn and manage that better. But because it is a spectrum, again, it depends really where they are on the spectrum. My son is much more on the milder side of the spectrum. He can get along with his siblings, but what he struggles with is actually his ability to control his anger, his temper, expressing his emotions, verbalizing them, his inability to take jokes and sarcasm, all of those kind of things. So it's a lot more around that interpersonal kind of social interactions that he struggles with. But otherwise, he's able to get along. But with that, it really does depend. It's a it depends where they are on the spectrum, where it kind of specifically comes up. Couple of points. Our time is almost up. My 14-year-old constantly undermining my son who has ADHD. They get into an argument and it can become quite aggressive. How do I react to this situation? A lot of the things that you're going to do with the children is you need to have, you need to speak to them beforehand in order to give them the right tools and equipment. And a lot of them is actually about that what you do beforehand. So when they come into that situation, you try and guide them through that difficulty. So it's try the approaches that we've kind of discussed today of speaking to them beforehand, ensuring that they know what the correct boundaries are, discussing about the issues around fairness and equality, and then when they do get into those situations, try and observe from the sideline how they kind of managing it. And like I said, try some of those techniques, try those approaches, and if you're consistent in those approaches, it's not something that works overnight. It's not something that comes straight away. But the more consistent you are in the way you deal with things, the more the children will then basically understand and get better with that, inshallah, as well. What if people say that if they don't apologize, the child thinks that they can get away with it? No, the child will have to. The apology issue isn't about there and then. Remember, we talked about it that when a heat of the moment situation arises, in that moment, we're not talking about doing it then because the emotions are high and nothing ever actually makes sense for them. Rather, we're talking about after the time has passed, you actually then you have to still deal with it. You don't allow a child to get away with something that's happened. Rather, you have to address it at a time when they can actually learn and take it in. When you're angry and you're seeing red, nothing's going to actually go through to you. Really going to kind of penetrate into your mind. You have to calm down, then you can see things more logically and actually kind of learn from that, inshallah. Apologies, time is now up because at 9:30 I have to be off now. It's 9:28. There are some more questions. As I mentioned every week, there is a WhatsApp group that is there for mothers and for fathers, separate group. The mothers group is run by my wife and the fathers group myself. And in there is designed for mainly for Q&As. So please do join into the WhatsApp groups, drop a message there in the group. If you don't want to then message in the group, if it's more of a private matter, then you can join, you can send a private message to myself or to my wife, the admins of each of the groups. I'm just going to drop now the link to the mother's WhatsApp group, and then now I'm just giving the link to the father's WhatsApp group. The mother's group is almost full. We're going to have to make a second group. There's a lot of questions that come in every week, and it's actually a lot of questions that I'm trying to deal with and address, inshallah. And we can inshallah deal with that. As I said, this session will be it has been recorded. It will be then uploaded onto YouTube within an hour, so you'll be able to by tomorrow morning, so you'll be able to access it. And the slide decks, inshallah, will also be shared in the WhatsApp group. So please do join the WhatsApp groups, and then you're able to at least get access to the video clips, to the slides, and the ability to ask a lot of questions, inshallah. So please do. Again, for the YouTube clips, just on Google, on YouTube, if you type Involved Fathers, you'll be able to find the page. Please do subscribe to, inshallah. And also you can follow us on our Instagram or on Facebook. Facebook is Involved Fathers. Instagram, same thing, is Involved_Father. Inshallah. Now in Ramadan, the last point I want to mention is Ramadan. We're going to be now continuing still in Ramadan every Sundays. I did send out a little survey questionnaire in the WhatsApp groups in order for what is the best time. We're going to move to a daytime. So next week, inshallah, the sessions will now be at 4 p.m. Yeah, so every Sunday, 4 p.m., 4 to 5 p.m. That's what the majority of the people who did kind of vote, and we got the time for. So next Sunday, and then thereafter, every Sunday during Ramadan, between 4 and 5 p.m., inshallah, we will have sessions, inshallah. Also, if you join the WhatsApp groups, if there's any topics you want to cover in any of the sessions, please do also suggest them in the groups. That will be very useful, inshallah. And we'll end it here today. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.